Welcome to Equipped to Endure. I am Rusty. We focus on all things emergency prep and self-reliance. We do this through gear review videos as well as training. So if this is of interest to you and you want to up your game, be sure to subscribe as well as hit the notification bell so you're alerted when we post new videos. Also, follow us on Instagram and Facebook. We post things there, independent contests from each other. So if you're not an Instagram person but a Facebook person or vice versa, we have giveaways for you there as well as some interesting content. We recently met up with the guys from CRKT at an outdoor retailer show, and they showed us a pretty interesting new product that they developed, or newer, and it's designed by the famous Ken Onion himself. Ken, if you're watching this, kudos to you. I don't know how many different knife designs you put out there, but this is a pretty novel concept that we're interested in. So the use case for this knife, this is the Homefront and the Bona Fide. And the idea is that when we use EDC knives on a regular basis, they tend to get kind of gunked up. I mean, you get the lint, you get the debris, the sand, boogers, whatever else down in the joints of your knife, and it can be kind of tricky to clean. So the use case for this was, hey, let's design something that's easy to take down, similar to something like an AR-15, where you can pull apart the components, clean it, and put it back together easily. And boy, did they nail it. So the first model we're taking a look at is the Homefront. Now for me, when I get this in my hands and look at it, if Captain America had a pocket knife, this would be it. I mean, it's even got the star and everything. It has very much the vintage World War II kind of look, feel, everything. It's a really neat piece. Now, you open it up with the flipper. Everything looks normal. Has the fuller on there. Really cool big belly on there. But the novel component to this knife is the takedown component. So this lever, you move, that breaks apart at the top, and then there's a wheel, almost like a spur at the bottom. And as you unwind that, it unthreads the other piece that's holding the scales together. That allows these to come right apart. And look how easy that is to clean now. You don't have to mess around pulling apart the screws, getting the Loctite in there, or any of that kind of stuff. It's good to go and clean. And then assembly is just as easy. So it has this main pivot point with the other peg right there that helps guide the motion of it. So you can see here how that works and how that keeps it in line. So then again, you line it up and then you tighten it up with that spur. Let's make sure I'm going the right way here. That looks right. Once it stops, and then you lock it into place with this lever up top. So now that's back together. You can drop it. It is durable. With this version, I dropped that probably 50 times thinking it might break apart, and it did not. Then it's right back to use. Easy cleanup, no muss, no fuss. Really neat concept. All right, moving on to the Bona Fide. So first, this was their first iteration of the takedown concept with the 2 attachment points that you need to operate. This is one component, and really what this reminds me of is a slide release on a pistol like a Glock. So with one motion, you push this over and up, and then the knife comes right apart. Now, I was very skeptical when I first got my hands on this. I dropped it bunches of times. I was seeing if this thing would break, the attachment point would eventually fail, and it did not. This particular knife, I've opened, taken apart, dropped it probably 50 to 100 times or more. And it is held up just fine, so I'm impressed. I thought it might be a cute novelty, but wouldn't hold up, and that has not been the case. Same thing. Line it, put the 2 pieces together, and with only one attachment point, it holds together. Let's make sure that I got it closed. Perfect deployment. It's got a liner lock as well, and I should have mentioned, as far as comparing these two, the Homefront, make sure I can get that in shot, and the Bona Fide, both are liner locks. Now you can see that the Homefront has a little bit thicker of a liner lock. I do like that from a safety standpoint, even though I do feel like this is pretty solid, and we'll get into that in just a moment. Now, these are 2 newer models from Ken Onion, the Homefront and the Bona Fide, that I think are really neat concepts. And one that Chris carries is called the, let me read this again, the Otanashi Noh Ken, and that means the silent sword. And the use case for this, it was designed specifically to be a tactical knife with a low profile to make it easy for carry. Now for me, that's a little bit long of a blade and a little bit bulky, but some people like it. But it is very well designed for its use case. And CRKT, if you are listening to me, What I've been told is that the intent of this blade was to penetrate far enough to touch somebody's heart. Now, I don't know how that could be part of the brief and the design process, and you not name this the Cupid. You missed out there. Should have named it the Cupid, but Silent Sword's still pretty cool. Now, the tricky part about giving you some sort of objective feedback on how good these knives are or are not is a lot of it's subjective. You know, do you like the look? Do you like the size? Those things kind of depend on you, but there are a few things that we can remain somewhat objective about, so we're going to cover those for each one of these knives. Now, the first one that we're going to talk about is ease of deployment, and what we mean by that is the point of carrying a knife with you so that you can use it when you need it. Now, what I'm looking for on ease of deployment is how easy is it to grab, to get out, to index, to hold. How easy is it to open the knife, and then make sure that you have a strong purchase on it to use for whatever you need it for. Also, another big thing that I really want in an EDC knife is I think it's very important to have one-handed deployment. Now, I know that you can fight over this in the comments. Some people are really sticklers for their Swiss Army knives or whatever, but for me, if at any situation, if it could be for defensive or if I have an injured limb or something, I want to be able to open my knife with one hand. Now, as far as giving this a 1 to 5 score, everything is solid, everything works well. The only reason I'd give it a 4 and not a 5 is because it's not assisted, it's not an automatic knife, so you know, maybe you miss on it or whatever, but I think it's a solid 4 out of 5. Now, moving on to the safety of this. Safety will consider such things as, do I trust the locking mechanism? Do I trust it to keep this open? Are my fingers in the way as I'm closing it? And one thing with a liner lock or frame lock is you do reach across the path of the blade to close it. Now, some people like that. Some people don't think it's that big of an issue, but for me, from a safety standpoint, I would knock that. I would only give that, again, it's still pretty solid. I do feel like that knife is staying open, but just the fact that you have to brush your finger across, I would give that a 4 out of 5 on safety. Also considering the point that there's not really flop in this or slop, and because it's a tip up carry, I want to make sure that it stays in there so that the retention on the knife is good, so that if I'm reaching into my pocket to get it, I'm not going to get a surprise poke because that blade was sloppy and sitting open. So I'll give that a 4 out of 5 on safety. Now, as far as craftsmanship, we're going to consider things like the smoothness of the action, the tightness of the tolerances, and the consistency of the grind. Now, this particular model was sent to us by CRKT, and this was one they used at their booth, so they actually took the edge off of it, so I can't necessarily speak to that. But as far as the cleanness and consistency of the lines, the overall general tight appearances of it, particularly when you open it up and have everything has to fit right together, I would give it a solid 4 out of 5. Across the board, I think this is a really solid knife that would hold up for years, particularly maybe even generations. Moving on to the Bona Fide, let's talk about ease of deployment. Same thing, this is a tip up carry with a deep clip, meaning that you can carry it and that not much is sticking out. When you grab it, easy to index, grab the flipper and flip open. It's got a smooth opening, if not a little bit loose, and again, I could probably take some of that out by tightening the Torx bolt there. So ease of deployment is pretty good. Again, not assisted, but I will still give that a solid 4 out of 5. Moving on to safety. This again is a liner lock, a little bit thinner than the other, but it still is catching enough of that blade where I feel confident that that will not collapse on me unless I want it to. Because it is a liner lock, you do have to reach across that blade path to close it. But other than that, I don't feel a ton of slop. There's a little wiggle in that, but that could be removed by tightening it up. And then this one, though, again, like I said, this is a little bit looser than the Homefront, maybe because I've been banging on it so much, but it is solid. I do trust the safety on it. 4 out of 5 there. And as far as the craftsmanship goes, for what this is, for a production model knife, everything seems pretty solid, particularly with that field strip technology that allows us to break apart and be put together over and over again. I think they thought this through very well. And the actual locking mechanism that catches the other part of the scale with that pivot point and how it locks together, it's impressive. I've dropped it, I've looked at it, and the thing keeps going back together, solid as ever. So from a craftsmanship standpoint, again, 4 out of 5. A 5 guys, that's actually good score. 5 would be, or 4 is a good score. 5 would be something like, this thing is perfect. This thing is outstanding and superb. And for a production knife, particularly at an affordable price point around $100, this is really good quality for that price. Now, finally, let's look at the Silent Sword. This thing is big. Personally, I wouldn't really carry this thing. It's a little too big for my taste, but to each their own on it. Now, from a ease of deployment standpoint, this was designed specifically for that, to be easy to deploy and use in a defensive situation. And for that standpoint, I think they hit the mark. With the thumb stud on the spine, it does give you a little bit more purchase to flick it open. I prefer the thumb stud on the side, and as a matter of fact, I actually prefer the flipper for ease of deployment, but again, it's not difficult to do. Now, this has the full frame lock. So, well, let me go back. So ease of deployment, you know, this is going to be sitting right there between this is about a 4 for me. I think if it was assisted, it would push it up to a 5. Now, from a safety standpoint, I do like the full frame lock better. That feels awesome. And then the fact that this has that little safety switch, so we'll show some B-roll, but when you push it over, it keeps that frame lock closed, so that blade will not collapse on your finger. I love that feature about this, particularly for its intended purpose. So that is a very safe component there. It is a frame lock, so the blade does kind of go in your way there, but I think that safety overcomes that for me. I might go 5 on safety for this, for its intended purpose. I feel like that's a really, really nice feature, and that was well thought through. Now, from a craftsmanship standpoint, this ticks the boxes. It's extremely functional. It does what it's designed for. There's really no muss, no fuss on it. A big solid handle for you to grip onto. So I will go a solid 4 on that as well. Now, any criteria beyond this are really going to be subjective. How much do I like carrying it? Do I like a big knife, a small knife? That's up to you. But all of these knives we think are really well built for their price point. We're glad that CRKT sent this out for us to look at. Again, that's really a cool new technology, that feel strip. And we would encourage you to go check it out for yourselves and see if any of these are what floats your boat. All right, thanks for hanging out with us today and checking out these CRKT knives. Again, if you're new to the channel, we invite you to subscribe if you're interested in self-reliance and emergency prep topics. This is all we do. This is what we cover. So follow along with us. Also keep in mind that we do a lot of giveaways. So be sure to get to the video as quick as you can. Sometimes it'll be first come, first serve on the giveaways. And also check us out on our other media like Facebook and Instagram. If you have a product or service that you would like us to check out, potentially show to our awesome followers, go ahead and hit the link down in our description that sends you to our media page where it tells you what we do, how we do it. And then speaking of our phenomenal followers, I would like to deeply thank you for your continued support and patronage and views. And until next time, in OMNIA PARATUS.